Ooh, when the neighbors have country music going, you know what sucks? I used to hate country music. And ever since we started like even building this place, something changed. And I'm guilty of a little bit of country music. It's not good for the work environment though. I've never listened to it while I'm working because you'll go slow and just not a thing. This is Eric Lee's F-150, a little insight into my life. The last place I worked for someone, and I didn't have a business, I was there and there was this bunch of series of events, and I told myself I'm never working for someone ever again. I used to like call people I trusted in my circle, or I'd call my wife and I'd be like, I'm never working for anybody ever again. After this, I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't care. Just, I don't have any tools, any means to do stuff on my own, but I'll tell you one thing, I'm not gonna work for anybody ever again. And for a while, we didn't build this whole truck, so there's a reason, but the other work on this truck was at the shop that I used to work at almost 6 years ago. I was so resentful when I got fired or let go for like a year and a half. Resentful. I'm like, if I see insert name here, I don't even care if I'm in the grocery store, I'm gonna fuck him up. I'm just gonna have someone hold my kids. And I was like full of pain and hate. Like, every time I'd see stuff that this shop was doing, I'd like want to either block it or not. Like, I'd get butterflies in my stomach. Just, I didn't know how to deal with it, and it was so fresh of a wound that it was not something I could handle and palate. And now I look at everything, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be talking to you. We wouldn't even have a channel. I mean, maybe we would, but that was such a key tipping point in my life to go into the right direction. If anything, I have to extend a thank you. Thank you for firing me. Thank you for pushing me out into such an insane crisis. Comfort, out of my comfort zone to the point where I didn't know what to do. I had no money. We just moved into this rental house. It was the first day of first grade for my son at his new school. Lost my job, no tools, no means of what to do. Just pushed out onto a ledge to figure it out. And I would have never jumped if I didn't have someone put me into a crisis like that. And that's how life is. Now I look at it, I'm like, dude, thank you. I needed that. So anyways, I've known Eric since I worked at that other shop. They built this whole thing. It does make funny noises. It's not a V8. Sorry, Eric. It's not a V8. The wastegates are cool and that's it. But Eric wanted us to complete the cab cage in this thing. So really what we've done is this thing, it came complete. It sucks that it came complete because it was so shiny. All fresh parts that it's a bummer when you have to take that stuff apart to do hardcore fab work. So you have to use caution and take a lot more time with labor to remove things so they can go back together nicely. The front was done, the rear was done, and what we did is we connected the dots. So we put in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So a 14-point cage, all tied into the chassis. Cages do two things. I love doing cages. I love the wins you can get with doing them, but also cages do two things. They save your life if they're done right. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt. It doesn't mean that you couldn't have permanent damage. It means that your probability of not dying is a lot greater, and that's it. You can't have a cage and think that you're going to come out of something unscathed, but you can come out of it if it's done properly. Again, you can come out of it knowing you're not going to die. you know, and that's the key. So they're not to save your car. They're not to make you where you don't have scratches and bruises and bumps or injuries. It's just save your life. The second is rigidity. If you look at what a truck is, can you see like my hand here with this? Okay. If you look at what a truck is, it's a frame, right? It's just a simple 2 frame rails parallel to the ground. Sometimes they're boxed, sometimes they're not. Some people box them. They're usually always boxed from the front to maybe about where the transmission mount is. C-channel, mild steel, recycled metal, just not optimal, not strong. What happens when you're pushing trucks? You're hitting the compression zone, the bump stops, the shocks are bottoming out. You're putting extreme force on the back and on the front, especially in the front. When you stuff the front, typical thing, like even when I first built my truck Beth, I had it caged and I had the cage come down here and I had the engine cage start here and I had nothing to tie these guys together. So what you do is when you stuff it, you know, you're lucky if you do it dead on and you stuff square into something, because at least it bends it equally. But the typical is like all of a sudden you'll get, you know, you'll have a heavy day of off-roading and then you'll open your door and it's like click and it'll bind in here because you've literally bent the frame up into this portion, like it bends right at the A-pillar where the body mount is. So it's crucial to have tie-ins from your windshield tube out to your engine cage. Crucial, 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 crucial. If you can do even more, better. Same with the back. You know, it's same thing. If you're coming through and you bottom the back out, this is gonna all bend and it's gonna dive your bed into the cab. Same thing, you're bending everything. Everything's going out of alignment. Then there's the other factor of the twisting. Now you're bombing something, you run, and you land sideways into something, then you're twisting because you literally have frame rails. And when you have an engine cage in the front or you have a bed cage in the back, all that's doing is just letting those two things do this. They'll still bend, they'll still twist. So the cage is a huge structural tie-in. You have to have cages in off-road trucks, especially when they're going through big holes and they're going fast. So what it is, it's just like a bridge, right? If you laid a flat bridge across, you would always have a support system, you know, of truss coming up and diagonally cutting through to make this thing solid laterally. And then you want, you know, this shifting method, which is the safety thing. So you want diagonals cutting left and right. Have to have it for rigidity. It's just not smart to do that without. And you know, if you look at like testing for OEM trucks, I just saw one on Instagram where they were doing like this test in Australia and it was this truck going through these bumps. Did you see that one with the bumper? And it had this little mark on each, like it had indicators. It had a straight bar or like a, you know, a straight edge on the front bumper, rigid mounted. And then it was indicating it on the body how much it moves because they're built to flex. And when you build off-road cars, you're building them to be rigid. So you're fighting this stuff. So what we did with the cage, it's all 2-inch. But again, our style is we run 2-inch and then we run different wall thicknesses based on where the structural demands are on the cage. So like your mains would want to be 120 wall. And then your secondaries to those would be a 95 wall. Your third or your tertiary tubes would be a 065. So different wall thicknesses, but they're all the same diameter. So the look is there, but you're cutting weight. And that's the thing, like when we did Vivian, we built Vivian front to rear using that same thing and we came out 5,800 pounds wet with a big full-scale trophy truck with a cab. So it works. You do not need to have that wall thickness consistent everywhere if you're thinking and you're being conscientious about what the structural demands are everywhere. Now, levels of cages. You want to think about getting in and out of these things. I know people probably look at that and they think that's hard to get in and out of. I'll get in and out of it for you. I'm short, but it still makes sense. Door bars. A lot of times people bury door bars in race trucks where the belt line here is all tube. That's optimal for a race truck, but for trucks like this, you want to consider something different. And a lot of the door bar is just a tie-in, again, you know, diagonal tie-ins for this chassis that we're building into the car. This is an easy one. This one that dives into here, This actually goes to the frame. There's a very consistent tube layout that runs. It goes up from the junction up there, which goes into the front. It dives down, it goes into the frame right there, and it shoots back up, and that's all one tube right into here. So, you know, that's one main. Then the rest, like there's 3 tubes over here that you can get shots of. There's some like miscellaneous bolts in here because the storage box is gone. But what you'll see is there's a lot of intersections. The other thing I like to do with frame rails is I like to grab the frame rail by a bunch of different points. Instead of like your typical, like a tube junction here, is you want everything to be cohesive and land in the same areas, you know, on center, whatever. There's a lot of technique to this, but when it goes down to frame rails, the reason all those 3 tubes look spread out is because they all converge onto the frame rail instead. So you're not diving a tube down and then landing all these above the floor line. You cut the floor out and then you dive everything into one cohesive area onto the frame, so it's grabbing this chunk. You can notice that on this section, and you'll also notice in the back wall. It looks like tubes are just kind of placed in a similar area, but what you're missing is if you had if you could see through there, all that stuff would dive right into the frame as a group instead of like one and then bing, 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 where you're adding a shear point. That's the danger zone that you don't want to go into, is shearing stuff, and that's what chromoly will do if it's put into a bad spot. It doesn't bend, it shears. The reason we use chromoly for everything, I'm trying to think of the simple term for that, or the simple way to explain it. There's mild steel, there's DOM, there's chromoly. I think there's another tubing that people talk about that I have no business even talking about because I don't remember and I don't use it, but we use chromoly for everything. The forces it takes to bend or to shear chromoly, what mild steel does is it bends, it doesn't shear, but it doesn't take a lot for it to bend, and it's the same with DOM. DOM's a gimmick. Use chromoly. Spend the extra money. If it's $4 a foot extra, spend the $4 a foot extra. Like, it doesn't matter, use chromoly. What it takes for chromoly to shear versus what it takes for DOM or mild steel to bend, it's not even comparable. It's intensely different. So building roll cages and structures, these things will outlast you if they're done right. They will be a 25-year chassis and you won't have to do anything to it. You might have to chase a crack here and there, but as long as you're not building a consumable race car chassis, you build a big heavy Prerunner with a nice chromoly cage, TIG welded properly with all the right layout, this thing will last forever. You know, over time, mild steel and DOM will consistently, you keep hammering on them and they will slowly but surely bend and tweak out of place. It's a given, it's 100%, doesn't matter how many tubes are in there. So there's a method with all this stuff. Something if you guys haven't seen what we do and you wonder about like these marks, why is it shiny here? Why is it dull here? This is all tube prep. The tube prep, essentially from the mill, all the chromoly has a mill scale on it. Hot rolled steel has it really bad, but chromoly still does have it. And what that is not the pure steel. There is a mill scale on here. So what we do is we prep all the areas where we're gonna weld to make sure we get the most optimal welding situation we can. Just go all in, you know, same with the gas. We use grade 5 argon. All of that is just a insurance policy for worst case scenarios. So you can check this thing out, the configuration here. Again, there's a fridge in here. This is a Dometic refrigerator. It's all wired in. So Eric will have a storage box. We just got back from powder coat, so it's missing right now. Getting in and out of this thing, it didn't feel too bad to me. And then you have so much room back here on this whole thing. This is the best seat in the house. Head space is all good. You're centered up here. And it's, you know, that's the other thing is, can you see this tube layout? Mm-hmm. Okay, so the other thing to note with a 4-door is your layout for this B-pillar wall, I do the best I can to not have intersections in here. I don't want to put one directly down here. I don't want to run these into here. There's two reasons for that. The primary reason is if there is your worst case scenario of a crash here, you absolutely want to be able to get out either through the front, or the front occupants need to get out through the rear. Something's happened, the windshield is blocked, the doors don't open, the one does. These guys up here need to be able to get out through here. This guy here needs to be able to get out through there, number one. Number two is if there's a bunch of tube work in here for the rear occupant, you feel completely closed off and not integrated with the rest of the occupants. Then you turn into this little jail cell where you are just rogue back here, you know, figuring things out on your own and you're not included. If you need to hand something to someone, you don't want to have interference here. So you can still get wins and you can build structure in where it makes sense, where you're not going overboard. If it's, you know, if this is the rear wall, it's a two-seater, then you can do whatever you want. Run a flying W like back here. Dead pedals. This is all stuff, you know, you can go over. But there's dead pedals for the driver. For the passenger, there's double adjustment on both of the passengers, which means there's angles put into this stuff. So you can adjust your feet, because if you're in this thing for hours, you don't want to be set just on one angle. You want to be able to move around and adjust your feet as needed, because you're not in control of when the car is going to stop or not. You're just along for the ride. The driver has his own dead pedal over there, but it's just based off of where it fits for the footwork down there, and it's not interfering with the brake pedal too much. A lot of little details here. Something I want to press on is the sheet metal and the use of the OEM trim panels. You can see that that's all factory panel, and then you can see there's integration of sheet metal tie-in. And what's important here is how much can we keep? You know, you cross this fine line, right, of building cars, and especially in the chassis, like the cages, you end up needing to tie in all the body, because, you know, once the body's floating, it needs rigidity, and you need to tie the stuff in. But, you know, you reach a point where, like, how much do I start tying in? And you lose the sense of the factory body panels. So what happens is you want to do these primary tie-in spots to, you know, you're bailing on the body mounts now, you're putting this cage in here, so you want the exterior body to be cohesive with the chassis and the cage. You don't want them shuffling around or moving or vibrating. So you end up doing all these tie-in plates. And then you go, okay, I got to draw a line somewhere. Where do I stop doing these tie-in plates? And what happens is usually right around down here, you just have guts of ugly sheet metal. And you're like, oh, upholstery is going to cover this or this and that. But the win, from my perspective, is to try to tie these together where you can still use factory sheet metal and get that look. And so that's what you see here is I put some brakes in here and some bead rolls, but also I broke it out bigger so it would fit, you know, it'd fit the factory trim. You know, rolled some of this. So as much as it's an aesthetic thing, it's also a structural thing of a tie-in plate, you know, and that goes in and then it just flows like it should. You can see it around here too. Same thing, it wraps. You know, this wraps over, this captures the panel with the little Christmas tree button, and it sends down here. So there's a good mix. You can see some of the details where the wiring is going in there. All this stuff is silicone bronze welded. I don't know if we're getting good light. There we go. All this is silicone bronze, and then you can see everything is, you know, typical double pass TIG weld. ER70 S2, 1/16 rod. You know, I don't use 045 rod to do the cover pass. I just keep it all consistent. But everything is, you know, and then again, like some of these tubes, right? Like your main is 120, and then you'll have like a 065, 095. So they're all different based on where they need to be. You know, not so much the length of them, but what their demand is. Let's move into the front. Something we can look at too, now that we're in here, is the dead pedal. I like getting these winds. This is tied into the seat brackets, you know, and then it's reverse flared holes, so you get grip. So you get a primary when you're getting in and out of the car here. These shoes are just blown out, I know. You get a primary where you're getting in and out, so if you're gripping on this thing to climb over the cage or not, you don't want to slip, especially if it's muddy or you have wet conditions. And then you have your big toe grip where you can kind of get lost in these things and put them wherever you want. I like to do a series of larger holes versus small holes. I just think the design and the detail is better like that, and it just gives you more of a dynamic grip. It's just a lot easier to process when there's bigger, more flared holes than a bunch of busy little bullshit. Map lights, obviously quite a few here. The one thing that we're missing in this void is our big service box. There's a large storage box that's custom built right here that lives here, and that was at Powder Coat. It's got its own light that lives in there as well. It's got 3 different openings with hinges and latches, but it's a great detail. Something else is harness bar integration. It's a little different than typical because this bend is actually going forward, so it's favoring more room back here, and you still have quite a runoff to get to your seat for your harnesses. You can see we use the factory trim again through here, and then you can see the dead pedals are integrated into here. You know, we tried to keep as much factory stuff as we could. Get in here, try to move. Something else to note is the aero tube. So this is streamlined tubing. What that means is there's a major axis and a minor axis. It's a teardrop shape. If you were to cut this, this is just aircraft tubing. It's turned into our signature with intrusion bars especially. It's got a good look to it. It helps with vision because when you look straight, it's narrow. When you're from the side, it's 2 inches. These radial gussets are also something that we kind of specialize in. We don't ever do perfect 45s. They're always in a supportive fashion, right? So, you know, just like on a ledge, if you had a support, you know, some kind of a structure coming off of a building that was a support, you know, and it was horizontal, then the gusset would go up to it and it would draw back onto the vertical side of the building. And it's the same thing here. So you don't need as much to support here, but you want to share a lot of that by drawing a lot of this and a lot of the surface onto the A-pillar. So, you know, that's probably a 7 or an 8 inch run of tubing that's a contact point that's adding more strength than just having it dive into a small junction. This is a wolf box. We use these often for every car. Digital rear view mirror. Has a lot of options. It has a front view camera, it has a rear view camera, it has a split option where it'll show you both. But you can see, just pretty tidy. You know, the Linger Racing boys, they build cars kind of spec to this in Michigan, and they call this Factory Premium Plus. And I like that. That's kind of what this is. There's little tie-in plates. But everything's got a home. This is just probably as good as you want to get for having a road car. You know, that you're driving places, driving to Mexico and then off-roading. This is definitely a 100-mile-an-hour cage. This is gonna save you when you need it. Mason Taylor's truck was a prime example of that. He had a pretty nasty rollover. Him and his daughter were in there. We did that cage about 5 years ago. 0 damage. Just went over. Everybody's okay. He's cutting the back of the truck off, but he's not cutting the cage out. He's cutting the sheet metal that's surrounding the cage and putting a new cab on, and that's it. Nothing's moved. Eric's truck has rolled 3 times now. A-okay. No damage. So I feel confident in these things, and I don't want to jinx it. But I'm always grateful when we can do a cage. I'm going to show you some of the rear details, and then we'll move through this thing. couple things back here. We are already working with a fully complete build, meaning all the bed cage back here to house the shocks and the coolers and all the appointments. That was already here. We wanted to come up with something creative because the whole bed cage that's already back here is already a bolt-on thing. So I didn't want to just plug tubes out of the roof. Didn't want to have weird, ugly bosses coming through or bushings or any weird shit like that. So same where they landed. We wanted to have something good, something that was our signature that we could put on this truck that, you know, it's us. And these structural sculpted pieces are kind of being something that end up showing their face on mostly anything we build. What those are completely structural. This is all 125 chromoly plate, which is 1/8 inch. There's a 3/4 tube in here that's rolled and shaped, and then it's all welded, full pin welded, all on tangent, sanded. We left one weld exposed. And it draws right up to the top. So this captures on the backside with a bulkhead, which means like a big primary box structure that has threaded areas, you know, and a puck in there, a 1-inch thick puck of aluminum. So all of the aircraft hardware goes in, captures to the cage. So there's a seamless situation happening where we're not cutting into the cab at all. Something else to notice is the integration of this rear light bar. Now there's obviously a backup camera in that shark fin up there. We built that. That's all aluminum. And then we have all this sheet metaled in where this is a sunken third brake light. This whole area back here, that's my favorite. It's my favorite part of the whole car. I think it just flows right. It feels good. But, you know, I love putting third brake light or, you know, rear tail light details on the rear of the car like that, on the upper roof. And this one, just the way it works feels good. So something that's not in right now is inner fenders. We do not have any of that going. The other thing that's not really noticeable here is the electric brake system. We added a 12-volt electric brake system with a accumulator. Absolute asset for off-road cars. The manual brake thing is a thing of the past to me. I think that it's just bullshit. You put big 6-piston calipers on here, and then you drive these things on the street. You know, they're 6,000 pounds, they have 40-inch tires, and you're concerned about how you're gonna brake. You're concerned that you might have to use 2 feet on your pedal just to engage. You have to drive differently sometimes because the brakes suck so bad that you need to drive evasively and think about how that's gonna work. So with this, that 12-volt brake system, it's insane. It's not super touchy, but if you wanna lock up all fours on the street, you can. But if you also wanna just be progressive and ease into them, you can. It's buried in there, we can't see it. The only thing I can see is some of our firewall work. We wanted to just kind of go with a factory move here. Not a ton of brakes, just something that looks like it came from Ford, but it clears the 40. The previous shop left that open so we could work in there. And I think I can get a couple of these tie-in points to show you. Sacrifice the body really quick. So see, here's some of the tie-in. That's your B pillar. There's multiple tubes going right there with overlay plates. You know, same deal in the front. Overlay plate, multiple tubes on a high angle, so the shear is minimal. And that's how this is throughout the car. I think that covers everything. This one, we turned around pretty quickly. You know, you can say you turn around quickly, but if the car sits, then that's still not a turnaround. But for what we did, I think we got it done in a pretty good timeline. Eric, thank you. So I met Eric 6 years ago, and he saw me. He's been accepting of me and my growth throughout the years, and he's been there from when I was not doing optimal, working in another shop, just coming in hungover, just doing the best I could. And he was always the same person to me, and I'm grateful that we can get this thing set up where it's safe for him. Eric uses his cars. This is him and Janie, his wife. They're gonna use the shit out of this thing. It's exciting. It'll be in Glamis. It'll be down in Mexico. And it's a beautiful example of a car, so I'm glad I can work with another shop. They did great on this thing. The cage tie-in. The reason it's raw too, I like, everybody loves to see raw fabrication, but it doesn't last, especially on the outside. It needs to be powder coated. Things need to have coatings on them. The interior cage stuff you can leave for a bit. If you take care of it, it'll last a couple years. And if you're like very careful and the windows are up and your moisture level is not crazy, it lasts. So Eric's gonna get 2 lives out of this. He'll get this raw form, and then he's gonna go back and get upholstery. He'll paint everything, and he'll get upholstery and a headliner and everything, and then he gets a secondary form. So it's been a good thing. I love taking on these cages. If you guys are interested in stuff like this, we do schedule appointments to take on cages. It needs to make sense for the vehicle, but you can expect this same consistency, layout, quality, craftsmanship in any cage project we take on. So hope you guys have a good Monday. Eric Lee's F-150. It'll be out there. Enjoy it.